Welcome to our mini class on practical data analysis and business intelligence. It's great to have you. In today's course, we're going to be covering practical ways that you can use data and we'll make it be applied in a business context. Welcome again. My name is Ahmed. I've been here at Astrolabs for about 7 years. And in today's course, I'll be teaching you everything that I learned from a data point of view and how I practically applied these concepts, mainly around data analysis and business intelligence. Before we begin, I'd like to ask everyone, what is data science? So if you can tell me in the chat what you think data science is. When you hear the word data science, it's a bit of a buzzword. So I want to ask everyone here, just put it in the chat. What do you think about the term data science? One of the things about data science is that there's no set definition. For example, if you go on Wikipedia, it'll say that it is a term that is contested. There's not one definition for it. However, how we like to define data science is that it is using data to solve problems, business or otherwise. The way that we like to think about data science is it's split into three main categories: statistics and mathematics, computer programming, and domain knowledge. So those are the three branches of data science. Now, whenever you're solving problems with data, there's also 5 steps involved, from coming up with the goal, collecting data, processing that data, analyzing that data, and making a decision. So that's sort of what data science is as a field. Now, the question is, what is data analysis and business intelligence? So now that we went over data science, what do you think data analysis and business intelligence is? Let me know in the chat if you can think about the answer. What do you think data analysis and business intelligence is? In short, it's basically the front layer to answer your business questions using data. So in a way, is this data science? Sort of. It depends on who you talk to, because again, there's not one definition to what is data science. However, what data analysis and business intelligence does is it uses data to answer business questions in the context of organizations and businesses. So most business cases that you'll come across are not really data science questions. They're more data analysis and business intelligence questions. One of the main differences is that data analysis and business intelligence doesn't use predictive modeling, machine learning, or AI. So in short, data analysis usually is something that looks at the past in order to predict the future and doesn't use models to predict the future. So it doesn't use predictive modeling. Instead, it uses descriptive modeling. And the main difference is that it looks at data that you already gathered in order to figure out what might happen in the future. However, data science uses programming and mathematical modeling techniques to predict the future. So for example, if I wanted to look at data, let's say that I work at a hospital and I wanted to know, is the vaccine successful for the patients in the hospital? If I was using data analysis, I could take data from the patients and then I could analyze that data and figure out, did the vaccine work or not? And that would basically help me make decisions for the future. However, if I wanted to predict something, for example, I wanted to say, would this new vaccine work or not? And I don't actually have data for that. I would have to use some form of data science to do what's called modeling, which I would have to predict the future. Most data cases that you'll come across are usually data analysis or business intelligence cases. They're not really data science cases. So data analysis, it does some programming, and it doesn't really use statistics and mathematics as much. So there's barely any statistics or mathematics involved. It's mainly about domain knowledge and some programming. So basically, data analysis is applying knowledge within a certain business domain or a certain organizational domain using some programming. So, for example, if I work for a hospital, I'm applying data analysis in the context of the hospital, of the medical field. If I was using business intelligence or data analysis in the context of an organization, I'll be applying data analysis in that context. So keep in mind that data analysis and business intelligence usually are things that are focused more on the domain knowledge of what you're solving for, or that area of expertise. In short, data analysis is also known as data science without predictive modeling or advanced coding. So by focusing on data analysis instead of pure data science, it allows us to work quickly, work efficiently, and not waste resources or reinvent the wheel for simple business cases. Because most businesses don't need complicated models to use in their data sets. They just need to solve simple business or organizational problems. And that's perfect for using in data analysis. So one way of thinking about this is, what is easier for the goal that you want to accomplish? So let's say, for example, that I wanted to build a house. So I could start completely from scratch, like the one on the left, or I could build my house from a existing template or an existing blueprint or model, and that would allow me to work a lot quicker in building my house. So which of these is the right way to go? Do I need to start building my house from scratch, or can I use an existing model or framework? Again, it depends on the problem that I'm trying to solve. If I wanted to build something very complicated that has never been done before, I would probably have to build it from scratch, which is mainly what data science is. Data science is using modeling tools to predict things that no one knows the answer to, right? So if I wanted to do something very advanced, I would use data science and programming and advanced statistics and mathematics. However, if I wanted to solve simple business cases, I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I can use existing tools and just plug in my data and solve for problems that have already been solved many times before by thousands of other organizations. So this way of thinking about it is also known as no code, which is a recent term that became popular mainly last year, which is a way to use existing software without having to actually code. And instead, you basically can apply programming knowledge within that software. So for example, if I wanted to build a website, I don't have to build it from scratch. I can use a service like WordPress or Shopify, for example. Similarly, in the data context, there are tools that I can leverage and use without having to reinvent the wheel in terms of how I collect data and process data. So for example, I can use tools like Google Data Studio, Power BI, Tableau, and I can connect to tools like Zapier to pull in data. So I don't have to actually do heavy coding. So that's what I'll mainly be covering today in today's session, is how to leverage these tools in order to solve real business cases. In short, we're going to basically look at this level of abstraction within programming, which is using sort of what's called visual programming or high-level design programming in order to solve business problems. We're not going to get into actual high-level programming like Python or JavaScript or on the operating system or any of those levels. Instead, we're going to focus on the level of what's known as visual programming or no-code programming. However, if you do want to deep dive into those levels of building, then we do have courses at Astrolabs where we do cover that. So for example, we have a full data science bootcamp where we actually cover Python, machine learning, and advanced modeling. So if you do want to go that route, we have other courses for you. However, in the context of today's course, we're mainly going to we'll mainly cover the level of solving business problems in what's called a visual way or in a high-level design way, without having to actually program anything from scratch. So what I'm going to do next is show you how to solve data problems using these 5 stages that I mentioned earlier, which are start with a goal, start collecting data, start processing that data, analyze that data, and then finally make a decision based on that data. Step 1 is let's define a goal. So what I'm going to do now is give you a practical business case that is very, very common that a lot of businesses try to solve for. And that is, what is the full return on investment of our marketing efforts? So this is a very, very common question that a lot of businesses face, is that they spend a lot of money on marketing and on outreach and sales, and they want to know that money they're spending, is it succeeding or not? So what is the return on investment for their marketing efforts? So that's the goal. That's step one that I'm trying to solve for. And the data solution is to basically calculate something that's known as the customer lifetime value, which is the actual profitability of the customer per marketing channel. So that's the goal that I'm trying to solve for. Now, what I'll cover next is these other steps that I mentioned here, which are how do I then collect data, process data, analyze data, and make a decision based on that data. So first step is to start with the goal. So step one is the goal, which is what is the full ROI or return on investment of our marketing efforts. Step two in this process is collecting data. In terms of collecting data, there are two types of data that I could collect. I could collect my own data, which is data that is gathered by the company. So this could be company data, offline customer data, online customer data, or it could be data that's gathered by a third party or some other software or platform. So for example, this could be online tools from tracking platforms such as data from Facebook, from Google, or it could be from any service that I use online. It could also be from external data feeds such as APIs or application programming interfaces or other integrations. The first type of data that you might gather is company data. So company data is data that you gather as a company about your company, mainly to do with the operations. So that could be company information that you gather, buying and inventory data, so basically sales and order data, logistical information such as shipping rates, shipping costs, storage cost if you're storing any goods or items that you're selling, cost data. So this is financial data that you might gather with your accounting team, for example. And in our case, if we're solving this business case of is our money being spent in the correct way, we need to gather cost data. Next up is customer data. So customer data is basically data that the customer gives us. So this could be, for example, purchase data. It could be data that the customer enters in our online platform. It could be revenue data that we gather. It could be loyalty program data. And I don't know if you guys know this, but nowadays a lot of malls and shops, they use these loyalty programs where they make you sign up for a card. Does anyone know why they do that? Why do they make you sign up for these loyalty programs? It's not that they want to save you money. It's because they can track you. So one of the biggest barriers in the past for tracking data was it was really hard to track customer behavior in a store, because imagine that a customer just walks in and they pay cash. There's not really any way for me to know who that customer is. Did they come multiple times? Is it their first order? However, by using data from them paying by credit card, I can have their full names. And if they're on a loyalty program, I can even have things like their email and their phone number. So I can actually know more about them and then target them better and know, is my marketing working or not? So that's why a lot of companies nowadays use these loyalty programs. It's not that they want to save you money. It's mainly because they want to be able to track you offline. And this also ties to in-store behavior as well. In the context of the problem that we're solving, we want to look at customer and revenue data from the customer. Next up is online customer data. This is basically e-commerce data if you have an online shop, marketing channel data, which is did they come to you from Facebook, from Google, from LinkedIn, on-site behavior, what did they do when they come to your website, and then offline behavior that's tracked online. So for example, if your store has check-ins that people can do through Instagram or Facebook or any other platform, that can also be tracked and then tied to your data sources. In our example, we want to collect e-commerce and marketing channel data. So the question is, how do we collect this data? So most people that get started with data, they say, okay, I know that data is important, but as a company, we don't really collect data. But that's not really true. Every company in the world collects some form of data. Even if you're a grocery store, you collect data. This could be as simple as Excel or spreadsheets. Even a grocery store has spreadsheets and Excel files where they collect financial data, or they get data from the point of sale system or the cash register. Almost every company, like 99% of companies in the world, collect some form of data. It doesn't have to be complicated in a database. It could just be something that you gather normally. More advanced companies might have their own databases. So they might have CRM systems, ERP systems, or customer databases, or they could have internal BI software such as Google Data Studio, Power BI, or any form of online cloud solution. And finally, you could get data from external data sources that are in the cloud. This is an important thing to think about, is how can I get data from other sources? So almost every company usually gets data from some other data source. So for example, let's say that you use an app like Careem or Uber to book a ride, right? When you use those apps, those ride-sharing apps, you'll notice that they have a map inside of them, right? Where you can track the driver and see where they are, right? And then basically when you're in the ride, it also shows your location on the map. That data is basically tracked through a API or a third-party connection with Google Maps. So for example, Careem or Uber, they don't use their own maps. They connect to Google Maps, and then that sends data that you can see in the app. That's basically what an API is. An API is just a way, it's called Application Program Interface, but what it means is it's a way for you to connect to data sources. So in this case, I can connect my app to Google Maps. Your business might be different. You might connect to financial data from somewhere else, or you might connect to, for example, Facebook data or Instagram data or LinkedIn data. And this could be public or private data. So it could be data that is publicly available that anyone can connect to, like Google Maps. Or it could be private data that's only for you, such as software that you pay for or CRM system data. Anyway, APIs are just a way for two systems to talk to each other. So that's how you can basically pull in data from external data sources, is by using APIs. And they usually share data with you in what's called JSON format or JavaScript object notation, which is unstructured data that you can then plug into your data sets. An example of what an API would look like is, let's say that I wanted to connect to Google Analytics. It would give me something that looks like this, where it would give me this data set in the form of unstructured data. I can then pull that into my reports and then use that to analyze my data. So let's do a quick recap of what we need to gather. So first of all, we need to collect cost data, customer data, and marketing data. Cost data and customer data would be internal data that we collect, and marketing data would be third-party or external data that we would need to gather through a API or an external connection with a data source. Basically, in very simple terms, if I was just using Excel for this, and that's how I recommend people start using data, don't think about complicated tables, think about just Excel or Google Sheets. If I was collecting this data in Google Sheets, it would look something like this, where I would have cost data, I would have customer data, and I would have marketing data. I would have these data sources, and then I would basically have to merge them together into a single source. How can I do that? I have to use some kind of business intelligence software in order to make my life easier. So these tools are basically software that allow you to connect data together from multiple sources, and it lets you merge them together. So examples of this are Power BI, Click, Tableau, Google Data Studio, Oracle, Azure. These are all tools that allow you to work offline and connect to multiple data sources. In the context of today's course, we'll be using Google Data Studio. So that's the first thing, is you have to use some kind of business intelligence tool. The second thing that you should know is in order to pull in data, I can use tools like Zapier. Zapier is a tool that allows me to basically connect to an API without having to program. So in the past, if I wanted to actually program something or connect to a third-party data source, I would have to code it myself. So let's say, for example, I wanted to pull data from Google Maps. In the past, I would have to actually program that myself and code it myself. So I would have to either be a developer or I would have to program it myself. Nowadays, I can use tools like Zapier that let me automatically connect to APIs without having to program. So it's basically, this is what I referenced earlier about using no-code tools or these high-level programming tools that don't have to actually have you program anything. These high-level tools are very useful if you are someone that's not very technical and you just want to get started with programming and like making these reports. I can use tools like Zapier for that. So I can connect to a tool like Google Data Studio and then connect to tools like Zapier, or even if I have Excel files, I can pull them in that way. And then my data would be integrated into the business intelligence tool, and I can basically track it and then basically what's called process it. Next up, I want to talk about something very important in terms of how you process data. This is relevant for no matter what tool you use. It's just about how data is laid out. In general, data is laid out either as a dimension or a metric. What does that mean? Basically, that means that data is either what's known as a qualitative value or a quantitative value. What qualitative values mean are data sets that you cannot perform mathematical operations on. So for example, country, language, age, user type, landing page, these are all qualitative values or dimensions. And that's what I use to filter my data by, these qualitative or non-number values. If you see a number, automatically think metric. Metric means something that is quantitative, that's a number. So in short, dimensions are qualitative, metrics are quantitative. And this is important because when you're creating reports, you always put metrics in your reports, but then you have to filter by certain dimensions. So for example, if I wanted to see what is the total number of people that attend my session per country, the country would be the dimension and the number of sessions would be the metric. So just keep that in mind. Dimensions are qualitative, metrics are quantitative. This is very similar to how pivot tables work in Excel, if you ever used Excel before, where you have data that's grouped in terms of rows and values, and then that can actually help you look for trends and analyze data based on that. What I want to do now is give a practical example of this using Google Data Studio. If you want access to this presentation and to this data that I'll be using, stay till the end and I'll show you how you can actually access this data. So everything that I'll cover here, you can actually do it on your own and follow along with me later on. All you have to do is, first of all, sign up for Google Data Studio. It's free. If you just go to Google and type in Google Data Studio, you can sign up for a free account. The only thing that you need is you have to have a Gmail account. But if you have a Gmail account, it's free. You just go to Google Data Studio and sign up for a free account. Next up is, here's the data set that I'll be using. I'll be using this data set here, which is just a data set of dummy data to pull in order for me to test this out. And then I just go to Google Data Studio and I make a new report. And then I say I want to pull in data from Google Sheets, which is where this data set is. So I can pull in this data. I choose the sheet that I want to pull in, and I want to say I want to pull in the customer data example, use the first row as headers, and then I click add. Then it will pull in that data into my dashboard in my report. I'll just click add to report, and then I'll have all of my data here. Then I can actually use this data and analyze this data. So for example, if I wanted to see what is the most popular gender in terms of revenue, I put gender as a dimension because, as I said, dimension is a qualitative value or a non-countable item. And then I can actually put revenue. So revenue, would that be a dimension or a metric? What do you think? That's right. Revenue is a metric because it's quantitative. So I can put that here. And then it will basically split revenue by gender. And then I can actually display this in different ways. So I can actually visualize this as a pie chart, as a bar chart, and it's super easy, right? So all of that, in short, is just how I can analyze data. And I recommend that all of you play around with this data set that I'll share with you here, import it into Google Data Studio, and then you can play around with it and see how data relates to each other. I just want to cover a few more things before we end today. So first of all, let's talk about keys. What are keys? Keys are ways to connect two data sources. So if you studied programming or databases before, you'll know about concepts known as parent keys, primary keys, and secondary keys. The idea basically is if I have two tables that I want to connect together, I have to look for some common key between them. For example, if I have these three data sets that I mentioned earlier, customer, marketing, and cost data, they might look like this. I would have to basically look for ways that I can combine them. So I would look for common keys that I can relate together. Then by doing that, I can basically clean them up and then turn them into one big report that I can then combine together. And that's basically what the report is that I'm sharing with you. It's all this data already combined into one report. If I was collecting this on my own, I would have to basically combine them first, and then I would be able to actually make a report based on that data. If you would like access to this video along with all of the slides and the example here, this link here, all you have to do is enter your details in astrolabs.com/learn-data. Enter your details there, and then our team will follow up with you to share these slides, which has this example data that I shared with you earlier, along with the video, so you can then practice this on your own and try it out. Thanks so much, and in the meantime, let us know if you have any questions. We'll be happy to answer, and hope to see you at a future session. Thanks so much.